Hello and welcome. I'm Maria Ressa. This is Rappler Talk. Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte declared a state of martial law in Mindanao just last night around 11:30 in the evening. That was caused by the attacks, fighting between the Philippine military and the Mauta group in Marawi, in and around Marawi. Joining us now is Justin Richmond. He is the founder and executive director of Impel Project, which works directly in counter-radicalization of Muslim youth in Marawi. At the same time, he has extensive experience in the southern Philippines, working in counter-radicalization as well as counterinsurgency. Justin, it's good to see you.
Thanks for having me, Maria.
So tell me, the events in Marawi surprise you?
They don't surprise me in the least. There has been a lot of groups that just haven't taken Maudi groups seriously. They haven't taken radicalization in the South seriously. Rappler has done a fantastic job over the past 2 years of documenting the growth of the Islamic State, and neither the government of the Philippines, the government of the United States, nor the international community have taken this threat seriously. And now we have Maudi group waving black flags and walking through Marawi city and burning buildings. So this is just the latest in a long line of provocations that have gone largely ignored by the powers that are supposed to be addressing these issues.
So we've been watching this in 2016 and how much it's escalated from beheading of Filipinos in orange jumpsuits to the times that they actually took over parts of Marawi itself, right? Or this was in Butig, in Lanao del Sur, right?
Butig.
Yeah. So tell me, can you explain what the terror threat is in this area, in Lanao del Sur and in Marawi?
Well, I think it's demonstrable what that terror threat is. It's the Maudi group and their affiliates, which looks like the Abu Sayyaf group is trying to link up with them. Their Maudi group and their affiliates have the ability to go pretty much anywhere and do what they want for a few days. The Armed Forces of the Philippines, who are the only group that's effectively working against the terrorist threat in the South, are doing a good job. Still need days to mobilize. There will be civilian casualties. There will be destruction to infrastructure, to homes and to businesses, as we see in Butig. Butig has been invaded 3 times in the past year, and I was in Butig just a few months ago speaking with members of that community. They are angry with the Philippine government. They are angry with the U.S. and the international community because no one has done anything outside of military operations to both stem the threat of radicalization and to help them recover. And I expect the exact same thing will happen in Marawi. There is no military solution to radicalization, and we have to stop acting like there is. Take it from an American that wore a U.S. Army uniform. Right? There's Iraq, Afghanistan, the southern Philippines. There's no military solution to these problems.
So let's just go back over 2016 and what a busy year it was for the Maudi group, right? From February 20th to March 1, the group attacked a military camp, established 3 strongholds in Lanao del Sur, and that displaced nearly 30,000 people. On April 21 last year, that was when we saw the Maudi group post a public beheading of 2 sawmill workers in orange jumpsuits. On August 27th, 50 men led by one of the brothers, Abdullah Maute, freed 8 of their members and 20 other prisoners from a Lanao del Sur jail cell. August 29th, we saw an ISIS propaganda arm claiming that ISIS was behind that prison raid. And then I think this is what you mentioned. On November 26th, the Maute group occupied Butig, Lanao del Sur again. So just in 2016 alone, they occupied the town twice. And then the very last one at the end of last year's November 28th, an IED was discovered near the U.S. Embassy in Manila. Why did authorities not take this seriously? Because if you look at what President Duterte has actually said, he's called forces out against the Maute group. How would you assess the reaction?
I think the Armed Forces of the Philippines is doing a fantastic job to militarily address this, but they are actually a supporting effort and should be a supporting effort. The reason that Maute exists and the reason that Maute is growing is because it's leveraging the grievances of the Bangsamoro people, grievances that are historical, that are political, that are economic, and completely legitimate, that the government has failed to recognize. You have the failure of the peace process that is driving this. You have the endemic corruption from mayors and governors across the ARMM that are taking advantage of the security and illegal services offered by these groups. This is really complex, and there is no military solution. And I believe I've talked to many of the military commanders down there, and they say the same thing. They say, we're doing our best, and I agree, they're doing a good job. But they need help. They need development. They need jobs. They need a lasting peace solution with the MILF. The MILF, in some areas, are the greatest buttress against Mauti, are the greatest buttress against these other radical groups, because they want peace. But until we get the peace process figured out, you know, we are stuck wondering what if, instead of actually leveraging a viable partner that knows these areas backwards and forwards. The MILF have an interest in peace, and quite frankly, they hate Mauti as much as many of the people throughout the rest of the country.
And that's interesting because the father of the Maute brothers actually was an engineer working, a member of the MILF in the past, right?
Sure.
So how would you, I guess what we've seen now are two generations of shifts from the time when the MILF was harboring Jemaah Islamiyah to now, as you said, when they're fighting the Maute group. How would you describe that evolution over time?
Well, MILF in many ways has grown from a military organization to a much more political organization. And as they've grown more into a political organization, you have people that are making good political decisions. And those political decisions are for peace and prosperity around Mindanao. Now, you do have issues like with the Bangsamoro Islamic Freedom Fighters farther south in Maguindanao,
right,
where you have a very interesting flow between some MILF camps and the BIFF. That doesn't happen nearly as much in Lanao del Norte and Lanao del Sur. There's better control on that. But the MILF wants a peace process because it's best for everyone. And you have small groups like Mauti that are pulling the radical or the disaffected MILF members off and using them for recruitment. There's one thing that you also brought up with the jailbreak from last year. Remember, with the jailbreak, not a single shot was fired as Mauti got all those prisoners released. That tells you everything you need to know about their power down there. That the local security forces are so afraid of addressing Mauti that Mauti will show up at their doorsteps at night, that they won't fire a shot to prevent them from the jailbreak. That tells you a lot.
Well, the accounts right now of the way it happened in Marawi seems to lead to that as well, that the groups that came into Marawi were welcomed. They had free reign. Is that what you're seeing happen?
Welcomed officially, no, but the vast majority of the population there is afraid of Mauti and afraid of speaking up against them. The government is weak. The local security forces are weak. The AFP are the only ones that can push back, but the AFP they don't have a sustained presence in Marawi proper. Mauti, like every terrorist group in the southern Philippines, leverages family relationships for safe haven when they need it. That's exactly why the AFP were going after them in this way. The problem is we have to figure out a way to incentivize communities and give them a reason not to support these radical groups. And those reasons exist. But right now, we're only applying a military solution to a heavily complex political and economic problem.
So we're definitely going to talk about that, a whole of government approach to this, which as you've pointed out, and as Rappler has also repeatedly pointed out, hasn't happened yet. But let's talk again. What do the Maute brothers, what does the Maute group want?
I take them at their word. I take them at their word that they do believe in a Salafist, a radical Islamist ideology. That harkens back to the early time of the Prophet Muhammad and his companions, about 3 generations after the passing of the Prophet Muhammad. They want to take Islam back to its roots. The problem with this is that their brand of Islam is anathema to the Islam that we find in Southeast Asia and all across Mindanao. The Islam that the Mauti group, Abu Sayyaf, and anyone proclaiming allegiance to the Islamic State does not coincide or agree with Sufi Islam, which is the overwhelming majority in the South. And if you look at what many people are saying on Facebook right now, they're saying that Mauti is un-Islamic. Well, it's not that they're un-Islamic. they would consider themselves the most Islamic.
Yeah.
But there is a battle right now within Islam, in the South. And no one is doing the work to empower the proper voices, the moderate voices, and helping Sufis to be able to stand up and be safe so that they can push back against these radical ideologies.
Let's go back to the ISIS links, right? Because again, you pointed out the Sufi versus Salafi. I mean, this is something that's finally come to the Philippines. But in terms of the links to ISIS, there were 4 groups that were identified earlier this year. January last year, Isnilon Hapilon, who is supposedly the target of the military attacks now, is actually in the Marawi area. He was declared the emir of ISIS in the Philippines, right? Along with Malaysians and other Southeast Asians. How would you describe how the ISIS links here in the Philippines? How would you describe it, Justin?
I think the ISIS links are one of patronage. The ISIS radical groups in the South have been looking for patronage after the fall of Al-Qaeda, after Al-Qaeda fell out of favor. But Al-Qaeda was always an elitist movement of well-educated and wealthy Muslims. ISIS is different. ISIS is populist. They are more than happy to bring criminals into their ranks, whatever it takes to grow their numbers. So there's a much more natural fit between Islamic State ideology and groups like Abu Sayyaf Group, Bangsamoro Islamic Freedom Fighters, and Mauti. So number one, that natural fit makes for much easier collaboration. But there are links. Number one, these groups have all pledged allegiance. They pledged bay'ah to Islamic State. That's a big indicator. Number two, these groups are organizing around fundamental Islamist ideologies. And number three, they are seeking to build a wilayat. They are training. They are giving their own allegiance. And we know that the Islamic State is sending people. They are telling people, stop coming to Syria. I believe Rappler posted this actually last year, that Islamic State is telling people to go to the Philippines to fight their jihad if they can't make it to Syria. Yes. How much more evidence do we need to take these groups seriously as Islamic State affiliates?
Well, it's very clear, right? There was a Filipino, an Indonesian, and a Malaysian in a July video that was released by ISIS. And the Filipino, his name was Kiram, actually told Southeast Asians to come to the Philippines and join the jihad. That was more than 6 months ago. At the end of December last year, the Malaysians were able to actually defuse a cell that was funneling fighters from Sabah to the Philippines. Before we go to the state of this, I guess you've worked in Marawi itself, and we've had many conversations about the radicalization of Muslim youths there. What did you find? Why are people tempted by this very virulent ideology?
Sure. In the southern Philippines, we see 4 broad trends. And what you have to understand is everybody's radicalization, the path to radicalization is individual. But it's all based in vulnerability. The vulnerability, the widespread vulnerability that we see in every area dealing with radicalization is the lack of economic opportunities, in just general hopelessness, despair. The fact that there aren't opportunities for them to get out of boutique, to get out of Mama Sapano, and so they're depressed and they're looking for some excitement, some hope, anything. And then you layer on top of that the issues surrounding corruption. Most of the governments in the area are non-functioning. There are no services. Education is poor. The Bangsamoro people have been mistreated for decades. The lack of emphasis on a real peace process to make the Bangsamoro people a full and equal part of the Philippines has not gone forward, stymied largely by political interests in Manila and by a misguided PNP operation to kill a couple bad guys in Mama Sapano. So at every turn, youth in these areas are hit with the lack of opportunity, racism, an attack on their own values, and they're not well-informed Muslims. They don't even read they can't read the Quran in Arabic, so that they're very easily influenced, and they're just looking for an opportunity. And when Mauti comes and says, "Hey, we'll pay you," will feed you, will give you some excitement, and will give you some meaning to your life. It's very attractive to many of these young boys, and many of these young boys are also in some way tangentially related, either socially or by blood, to these groups. And because these clans are so large and have ties throughout many of the municipalities, this is an incredibly intractable problem.
Given what's happened now, the way the Philippine government has reacted, declaring a state of martial law in all of Mindanao, do you see this, what do you see playing out in the next few days?
So martial law, I think it sounds a lot graver than it really is. I think it allows the military to take a few steps that are probably necessary at this point, because the regional and municipal governments, the city governments themselves, are fairly non-functioning and not able to deal with this. However, I think martial law is not going to address these underlying issues. It lasts for 60 days, and none of these problems can be solved in 60 days. And I don't hear anybody taking up this issue of, how we're going to develop these areas, how are we going to de-radicalize these youth, how are we going to address problems in people, how are we going to help elevate the voices of the educated and tolerant progressive Sufis that are trying to push back on these radical idiots. Talks about that. Everybody talks about more guns, more planes, and more military operations. How long will it take for us to realize that this isn't working? I served in Sulu in 2009 with the U.S. Army. We had the same problems back then. It was as an Al-Qaeda affiliate instead of an Islamic State affiliate, but it was the same general problems. And Abu Sayyaf is still going strong in the south.
Well, we've seen movement out of the southern Philippines, out of Jolo and Basilan into Marawi area, right? And then just a short while ago, in mid-April, there was the military actually foiled an attempted terror attack in Bohol, which is just across the bay from Marawi. So, do you see this spreading outside of the traditional areas where these, even outside of central Mindanao?
Well, yeah, I see it spreading outside of central Mindanao. The reason these groups are going to central Mindanao is I believe that they were told that Islam Hatalan was commanded to take his fight to central Mindanao. There are more Muslims there, there are more resources there. There are far more opportunities for them to grow, expand, recruit, and leverage their monopoly on violence. The reason Abu Sayyaf is leaving Jolo is because they're getting hammered by the armed forces of the Philippines down there, and Mindanao is a friendlier place to be, just like Basilan. At the end of the day, strategically, Jolo and Basilan are places to spur retreat. They are not going to be strongholds. Mindanao is the place, if you want to grow a true Islamic State, Mindanao is where you do it.
Looking at this from ISIS's eyes, and we've seen more than a year where there are references in ISIS propaganda, social networks, and their magazines about the Philippines. Looking at it from their eyes, this is one of the best. This is one of the best moves they've ever had. This is actually territory, right? Which is what the caliphate is aiming for. How do you see this playing out? Is this a bid to make this be a formal province of ISIS? What's next in this?
I don't believe this effort that we're seeing in Marawi City is a bid towards that state, that Islamic State wilayat. It won't necessarily be a caliphate because technically the caliphate already exists. In Syria.
So the wilayat,
it will probably fall soon.
I was going to say the wilayat means province, right? So what these groups in Southeast Asia have been trying to do is to get recognized, to get officially recognized by ISIS. Go ahead, Justin.
That's right. But that's exactly right. I think they are going to make that push. I think they'll make that push in Mindanao. I don't think they'll do it in Sulu or Basilan because they're small islands, and at the end of the day, you can blockade those islands, and the growth of the state, the growth of the province ends there. I think they're going to have a lot of problems because the AFP will sharply dispute their ability to set up a state. But quite frankly, as we've seen with bombings around the country, with the beheadings, with these operations to kidnap foreigners, I think we'll also see the kidnappings grow towards rich Filipino businessmen. I think it is inevitable when we will see attacks in the large cities like Cebu and Manila. Until we address the underlying issue, this will grow. Because right now, the state, the province exists in the hearts of these Islamic State affiliates. And that's more dangerous than any plot of ground that they can that they can hold for any amount of time. They don't need a stronghold because they can move so easily in and around the Philippines.
You mentioned earlier the failure of the peace process, endemic corruption, issues that impact people's lives in Marawi. If you were to begin to try to solve this problem, what would be the steps you would take?
Politicians need to be held accountable for the lack of services that they are offering in their communities. They need to be held accountable for the corruption. They need to be held accountable for their support. And that falls at the feet of President Duterte. And I believe that he's a strong enough leader to take them to task for this. He's done it in the drug war. He needs to do it for corruption because there is no hope, there is no opportunity and no peace in Mindanao without these politicians being held accountable and, quite frankly, probably being pushed for office. I will share with you one of the most powerful things one of the chancellor at Mindanao State University, Sulu, told me in 2009. And he told me this when I was an American soldier. He said, keep your schools and keep your roads. If you can give us a free and fair election, we can do all this ourselves. The people in Mindanao beg for a free and fair election. They beg to be able to elect leaders that will actually serve them and not the oligopolies that have held these municipalities and provinces for decades. That's the first thing that needs to happen. Then we need to see real economic investment. I hate to say it, but Luzon and the Visayas have received so much investment largely because of their Christian ties and because those Christian ties are deeply entrenched within the government. We need to start seeing true investment into Mindanao, into infrastructure, and also into the issues that are driving the lack of economic opportunity.
What kind of work are you doing in Marawi, Justin?
Right now, we just finished up our assessment, and what we're looking to do is to support moderate Muslim voices so that they can be trained in how to counter the radical voices. We're looking to engage youth and help them to find out what are the opportunities that they want, what do they see as their own future, and how do we help them craft that path forward. How do we address we see broadly in terms of resiliency against radicalization, we see two broad trends. Positive collective action, communities coming together to work for a common purpose, and we see broad inclusive stakeholdership. Those are the two primary themes of our programs. And so how do we create positive collective action? How do we help the people of Marawi to build back? In Butig, which is still not recovered from the three incursions from Mauti last year,
right.
We have programs that we're seeking funding for to help rebuild this area, to help give jobs to people, but to help help the community start working together again, get them away from this thinking that it's about my clan versus your clan, but about rebuilding communities that these terrorist groups are tearing apart.
In the short term right now, with the declaration of a state of martial law, with the possibility that this conflict is actually going to create internally displaced people who are already moving out of Marawi into Iligan or in surrounding areas, what advice would you give to people in the area and to those who could be caught in the conflict?
Number one, absolutely be safe. I've seen dozens of Twitter posts, of Facebook posts from various groups that are giving instructions on how and when to leave the area, how to do so safely, how to identify yourself as a civilian. Remember, though, that the terrorist groups don't take civilians very seriously. Killing civilians or embedding themselves within civilians helps to further their cause if they can create civilian casualties. So realize that the civilian population needs to be protected. The Armed Forces of the Philippines must take extreme caution in any of their operations. I would strongly recommend against aerial bombing campaigns, against artillery strikes, because all that's going to do is hurt infrastructure and hurt the civilians that are just caught in the middle. But I call on the international community to begin ramping up a response to this. and on the Philippine government to take this seriously. But then again, we can look at the responses to Haiyan and to other crises and see that the needs of internally displaced people have largely gone unmet for a variety of reasons, which is probably a topic for another Facebook Live chat or Skype chat. But I worry most about the civilians that are caught in the crossfire, and I worry that these bombs and artillery shells that are going to fall are going to make more bad guys, not less.
You've met some members of the Maute family. What narrative do they say? What do they tell you? Why are they after this?
Everybody has their own story when it comes to radicalization, and the members that we met were distant cousins who largely disavowed everything that their relatives have done. However, blood is very thick in Mindanao, and even when family members disagree with the ideologies of these groups, they will still offer them safe haven, or they will feel afraid to deny them safe haven. So these are all issues that that we must address on some level and make it both socially acceptable, but physically feasible in the security sense for, quite frankly, for family members to reach out to security forces and say, look, this terrorist group wants to take safe haven in my home or in my community, and I know that they're family, but I can't have them. They're going to bring violence upon my children, violence upon my family. And that's what we have to see. We have to see Filipinos, Christians and Muslims, Maranawans and Maguindanaoans and Tausug's and Yakan band together against this virulent strain of ideology. And that's something that has to happen.
So again, what we've seen is increased efforts and increased activity from pro-ISIS or ISIS-affiliated groups in the Philippines now in the last few months. In terms of funding, classified documents also show that there could be funding coming in from Indonesia and as far as Syria. Is that something that you can see on the ground?
Yes, I think there is, but it's very hard to see those ties. But I can absolutely tell you that Saudi Arabia is one of the largest funders of Salafism around the world, and they built an enormous madrasa in just outside of Holo Sulu, where people can come and be trained in that ideology. I also work in Bosnia, and no one has stoked radicalization more than the Wahhabist mosques in Bosnia. But where are the development programs that are trying to educate the Tausugs in Sulu? Where are the jobs programs? Those don't exist. And so when you have the only people that are offering opportunity and education, and they're doing it through the lens of a radical ideology, what choice do the people have in these communities?
Your last thoughts, Justin. I mean, where do you see this headed in the short, medium, and long term?
I don't see any progress going to be made until the Philippine government and its partners, primarily the United States government, taking this threat seriously and devoting actual development and aid and stabilization funds. And like I said a little while ago, we're not talking about building more roads and building schools. We're talking about addressing these fundamental underlying issues that have come up numerous times during this conversation. How do we address the endemic corruption? How do we address real livelihoods and real hope for the youth of Mindanao? How do we address the peace process that continues to be stymied by the Senate, by spoilers within other Bangsamoro groups that feel like they're not getting as good a deal as the MILF? These are all issues, and I will emphasize the only way that we can move forward on this is by crafting a non-military solution to complement the work that the brave soldiers in Marines and the AFP are trying to do right now.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. We've been speaking with Justin Richmond. He's the founder and executive director of Impuled Project, which is operating in Lanao del Sur and in Marawi. Justin, we'll speak soon. Thank you.
Always a pleasure, Maria. Take care.
You too.